Thank you. My approach is going to be much more of a helicopter one, and I can say that the stimulation I've had from the first three speakers certainly has got me thinking, and I hope what I'm about to say will get you thinking at another level. It's nearly 3 years since Ausbuy set up a group, which in Victoria we had a meeting about in the early or late 2009 around the issue of food security. It's become a fashionable topic right now, but 3 years ago it was hardly even mentioned. And what we found when we put that group together was one key issue that has become our focus. And the issue is that what we've done with policy over the last 30 years or so has basically meant on-farm income has been reduced, so that our farmers, as has been mentioned before, have actually lost the next generation of knowledge. And that's a key thing that I want you to take hold of in terms of what I'm about to say, because we work on the basis and that really we have the most extraordinary people in this country. We have been a productive, innovative and clever country, and what we are doing is dumbing them down, and that's really not very good. Sydney is my hometown, so I have a great passion for it. My lot have been here since 1792. And those of you who have read the history of the early days of this colony know that the first 20 years were very marginal. I mean, Richmond is a Macquarie town, and Governor Macquarie was the one who helped to open up this area. So if your blood is in Richmond, well then you've got very strong connections with the sustainability of this area. The issue is that we have got a wake-up call happening now that at least the food security has gone onto the agenda. What we've been doing is having countries buying our businesses and our land, and they have been making, and what we've been doing is encouraging that. We have a world population at 9 million and headed towards 13 million. Everyone else has got that on their agenda, and everyone else is taking an interest in what we've got. We're also seeing, whether you're a climate saver, naysayer or what, but I think Julia has said that, and some other speakers have said that, you know, that's something that, well, certainly I'm not sure whether it's man-made, but certainly I do know that things are changing. And whatever we're doing, we're going to put increasing demand on our non-renewable resources, and working on the basis that we've got as far as we have because of man's ingenuity. We now need to get ourselves out of this problem by getting our most ingenious and creative thinkers. But change is something that's very hard to occur. So what we're very keen to do, let's see this work, is, and I think this has been referred to a little earlier, that think about the picture of the house that Jack built. There would be many of you here who we actually read this story as children. The idea that the cat ate the rat that was eating the malt that was going to be used in the mud brick house that Jack built. So if you haven't read this story, I would suggest that you go and read it. Wonderful Mother Goose nursery rhyme. I'm an ex-infants teacher originally, so always my lyrical references are not so much Pride and Prejudice, but more likely to be a nursery rhyme. So the issue is that what we believe is we've been complicit in creating the problem for ourselves because we actually haven't seen or anticipated the problems. We've worked in isolated little units, and we've all been expert in our own area, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to, we are going to have to bear the consequences of those decisions. So there are some things I would like you to think about. The issue is that our wealth-creating assets are no longer benefiting Australia. We've allowed the control of every major food commodity, except for rice, beyond the farm gate to be controlled by foreign interests. And that's a great disincentive for farmers when they're being price takers, not price makers. In fact, under the jurisdiction of the ACCC, we have allowed 75% of our dairy industry to be owned by foreign interests. The Japanese own 54% of that. The New Zealanders and the Italians own the rest. On the front page of the Fin Review today, the Chinese are going to be looking at buying our dairy farms in Tasmania. They've already bought some in Western Australia, and the milk from those farms is no longer staying in this country, it's going offshore. The Chinese also bought the Victorian Dairy Research Centre earlier this year. They paid $1,810,000 for it. The Australian farmers bid for it, but they couldn't go any further than 1.8, and the Victorian government signed off on that. We also have the beer industry, which again takes the brewing industry, which takes many of its grains from our farmers, is now 90% foreign controlled. The sale of Foster's recently to S.A. Miller was 45%, and Kirin, Japanese, that owns 54% of our dairy, owns the other 45% of brewing. So this is the issue that has really compounded the lack of income and the lack of incentive for our farmers. What we've also had in the dairy industry is, if we go back to that, we've got Coles with their $1 milk. Before deregulation in the mid-90s, there were 22,000 dairy farms. Now, before the $1 milk, there was 6,600. Now there are only 600. There are 600 farmers, sorry, 6,000. There are only 600 farmers have stopped milking in the last 12 months because of the $1 milk. The other issues that we have are, when we look at the sale of, where are we going to sell our food to? Now we're talking here about referring to fresh food in the Sydney Basin. But if you have a look at the top 25 brands on the supermarket shelf, you'll see those that are in yellow are all Ausbuy members. They're all fully Australian owned. You will see there is an asterisk there, and they are the ones that are Australian made but not owned here. And the one with the red mark on it, they are the ones that were formerly Australian made and owned, but are no longer. So what we've got are the dominations of global companies owning a food chain beyond the farm gate, and again making our farmers price takers, not price makers. And the issue is, once those assets are owned by them and they take control. For example, the ACCC in the last a few years ago, as you know, the AWB, we were chastising ourselves and mea culpa for what was happening in Iraq with our wheat. So the cooperative that controlled the wheat output at a single desk selling for Australia was dismantled, and the Canadians bought that, the AWB, and they called it Agrium. Earlier this year, Cargill, a privately owned American family company, bought Agrium from the Canadians without a reference to the ACCC. So once assets that go out of Australian hands, they are no longer even referenced to the people who have any influence on what's happening in this country. Cargill also owns many of our beef exports with the Swifts, the Brazilians. And again, our people are price takers, not price makers. So when you see this good news about export and all this wonderful thing, just remember, if it's not owned, the decisions aren't made here, the profits don't stay, the jobs, the skills and the reinvestments don't stay. There is no account of what the real financial loss to this country is, not just in the people and the skills, but in the real bottom line dollar that occurs. And if the government keeps saying, yes, we need this investment, our people aren't doing it, just consider that the people who are buying our assets are borrowing at 0.5% offshore. They are, under our tax laws, they will only pay a 10% withholding tax. That means if the profits that they make in this country, when they're paying off their assets offshore or sending profits offshore before taxes, consultancy fees, they're only paying 10% tax. When they run out of those incentives, as you've seen with people like Heinz in the last 12 months, they take their manufacturing offshore, they set up offshore, as Heinz has with New Zealand, and they sell back to us as brands that we as Australian consumers buy and don't even think about. So, you know, it really is an important thing from Ausbuy's perspective that consumers are informed about where our food comes from. The countries that are buying our land have already long recognised the importance of having food security. In 2003, Mr. Bush gave his farmers $231 billion because he wanted to support them. That was important for their food security. In 2005, we signed free trade agreements in agriculture with America that were required that we have tariffs on our products going over there for 20 years, up to 20 years, while we've given free access to ours. You'll hear the mantra of free trade agreements, level playing fields, this is our duty. You know, we are paying for all of this because the people who are making decisions have got no idea of the consequences of those decisions, and they're not thinking long term. So what we want to do is to get, our focus really has gone with the frustration at the decision-making level, is to put the power into the people's hands. And that's why we are so consumer-focused, and that's why the companies that we represent are all Australian-owned and all majority-sourced. There will be some elements that we no longer even grow here, but the integrity and the quality of those products is what we've been hearing about in terms of the scientists here tonight. So what we have, for example, are a set of rules, What we have is a set of rules that we talk about, which is the $50 billion test. And that says for every consumer to, when they go shopping, if they make a decision to buy an Australian-owned good which is sourced from this country, then we will have an Australian-owned and made good. Then we will have a $50 billion multiplier effect within our economy. It is a change of consumer behaviour. We've heard about a lot of really important, innovative things that are occurring. But these are changing our own everyday behaviour that can make a difference to each other. That $50 billion represents about 3.3 million people on a basic salary in this country, is the amount of tax that they pay our government as payroll tax. So it is a significant difference that we can make in a small way. There are, one of the things that we did in late 2009 was, well, the Senate had an inquiry into truth in labelling, and in that time we had, were the only organisation that actually proposed that we should have country of origin on our labels. What we've seen is a lot of brouhaha, nothing is done. If anything, in the last 3 years, our labelling laws, which are your way of understanding what you're buying, have become more feral. You've got products that purport to be made here which are not. You've got things like made in Australia, which under the rules means that only 51% of the wholesale cost of goods was substantially transformed here. That means that we could be bringing food from overseas, bring it here. It can be have some components which are Australian product, but if it's transformed here and the packaging and the costs are there, it can still say made in Australia. A lot of, I've mentioned that Heinz have gone off and set up in New Zealand. They have a free trade agreement in agriculture with China. A lot of food is coming from China, processed in New Zealand, is now coming to us as made in New Zealand, with no country of origin. These are issues which our politicians are pushing under the carpet, and it's the inertia, and we are paying for this every day. And you don't have discussions like this about our own security as a city unless you've actually seen this erosion of that across the country.
In 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll just give you some examples. We have went shopping this time last year, and at the supermarket shelf there were Australian navel oranges, there were American navel oranges and Egyptian navel oranges, all $3.99 each. So it wasn't about a price differential, but those that were coming from overseas were no doubt subsidised and maybe even dumped here. And our farmers would have taken a price that the retailer was prepared to give them, and if they didn't take the price the retailer wanted, the retailer wouldn't buy from them. We see this with our manufacturers, particularly in private label, because if they don't meet the price that they can get overseas, they don't get the business. And you know, that is just not good enough in the current environment. So what we've done, and we've got a for sale sign on our wealth creating assets right now on our land. The fact that the Chinese want to buy the dairy farms, that's one thing. But the Indians, the Arabs, the Americans, the Canadians, a lot of the Singaporeans, sovereign wealth funds are buying our land, and that is potentially going to lock us out of control. When they buy the properties, the food will not necessarily stay here. So that really does become an issue of food security. So it's not just in a city of 5 million that we're talking about. But we are saying that we're great. We're saying we haven't we're telling the rest of the world, come and buy what you like, there are no holds barred. And they just see that as a beacon to plunder us. And that really is not good enough from our perspective. What we've done as Ausbuy was with our frustration, we certainly do get a lot of media around this, and we certainly do talk to the politicians. But what we've done is we've got a petition, and it's called Time to Wake Up Australia, where we're asking our people to basically go and sign that petition and to say that, look at the moratorium, for example, that what we are asking for is a moratorium on the sale of our land and our wealth-creating assets until we have a national interest test. Another group of words that are now bandied around, and that's what the petition is really about, that we really want to ensure that our people we're able to plan for our future rather than this short cycle. We've already seen from our speakers tonight, and I know that there will be a lot of knowledge amongst you this evening. We want our people to regenerate this country. We want to give our people a fair go, and we don't mind if other people want to come in and share part of that, but why should they have complete control or majority control over wealth-creating assets, which at the end of the day, it's our people who have built. You will hear people say we've always had foreign investment. We were terra nullius 224 years ago. We're not now. It's the effort of thousands of years, collectively, thousands of hours of your time and generations before us have been put into this country. And they're the ones that we want to support. As far as Ausbuy is concerned, it is a privilege every day because I'm actually working with people who are growers, vertically integrated businesses, manufacturers who represent the very foundation of what they built this country. And what we're asking for in terms of the Sydney Basin and beyond here is for us to have a strategic plan which gives priority to our own. We don't even use the word protectionism because it is spat out as if it was a bad word. And I've dealt with trade. Let me assure you, everyone else in the world looks after their own first, but we certainly are not doing so. So I would urge you to go to our website and to please sign the petition. We really want to get it to the government fairly soon. We've got about 50,000 people so far in terms of paperwork and what's online. So if you want to have a voice, please do so. And please, we've got some books at the back that you're very welcome to take. And I look forward to answering any questions you might have. Sorry I went over that, Alistair.
Thank you very much, Lynne.